Morning, everyone. I'm just going to set a timer. I'm told I only have 30 minutes, and I really would love to talk about 2-3 hours here. Let's get into this. Okay, pathway to competitiveness. It was a bit of a commission to do the work, and we thought about it for a while, and you start to think, well, it doesn't really make any sense, this pathway to competitiveness thing. It's sort of like there's a gazelle, and it lives in the African savannah, and it can't outrun a lion. It doesn't need a pathway to competitiveness. Isn't it just dead? How do you need a pathway to competitiveness? You're either competitive or you're dead in the world we live in today. And well, I'll give you the answer to that. We figured it out. Let's just get into this. We'll talk about the problem, a little bit about the problem, and then talk about what we think the solutions are. I'll skip a lot of this stuff. I'm just presenting straight out of the document. What's the challenge? Western Australian agri-food, and you can believe your own hype. You can smoke your own crack, however you want to, whatever metaphor you want to use for that. Don't believe the hype. Western Australian agriculture, yeah, right. Yeah, pretty good. Some areas, very competitive in some areas. A lot of areas, a lot of work to do. Okay, this is. You don't need to read the details of this. Western Australian agri-food export growth over the past decade. So this is a whole lot of countries in the world. We've actually done this for every single country in the world. We'll leave that out. Up to the top left there, you got the U.S., Brazil, the Netherlands. I mean, the Netherlands, that's not big. You could lose that in a farm in the north. Germany, China, all the way down to the bottom here, down in orange. That's our problem child. That's Western Australia. Taking out the Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, and just pipped at the post by Latvia. So Latvia's taken out Western Australia in terms of agri-food export growth. So the results aren't happening. As amazing as we are, as amazing as we think we are, it hasn't worked. And if I look at this, we put this material up, and sometimes it comes as a shock to people, and I think about it, and maybe I'm just mad or whatever it is. Australians, as someone someone once told me I was an Australian's worst nightmare, a Kiwi raised in America, but as an Australian's worst nightmare, Australians are sports mad. If I said to you in this room, look, what's the best team in the AFL? You'd all tell me. You don't know who it is, so you have 2 or 3 guesses, and you might have your own personal point of view. If I said, who's the best cricket team in the world, you'd probably tell me you think you knew that or something or other. And if I went to the National Hockey League, some of you could probably tell me who thinks the best in the National Hockey League. In the U.S., American football. If I said to you, who's the best at growing broccoli in the world? Who gets the best yields in the world? None of you have a clue. They think about the products you grow. You have no idea. You have no idea who's the best at the world at what you do, and that scares me. That really scares me. You have no idea. Sports, you ask my son, who's the best soccer player in the world? Lionel Messi, or whoever thinks it is. And yet, you guys don't know who the best growers are in the world and who gets the highest yields, who's got the best farms, who's got the highest on-farm productivity. The message, I can wrap this whole 300 and something page document we did for the government into that. All right? Get some real data, and for God's sake, understand how good you are. And you're not as good as you think you are, and then go and figure out how whoever's the best in the world at doing it is doing it, and go and copy it. That's the message, and because the results aren't happening. For as good as we think we are, Latvia pipped us. Latvia. Israel's down here closing in on us. Israel's closing in. That's the size of a postage stamp. That's a God-honest biblical desert, right? It produces twice as much food as Western Australia on 1% of the land and 5% of the water. Right? Let's get some Israelis in here. They'll show you how to farm this place. You're doing it wrong. I'll give you a challenge right now. I'll give you the challenge. It's a real challenge, right? If someone could get in a time machine in 1820 in Shropshire in England and be transported through time and get off on your farm and walk out and have a look and really know what everything was other than maybe the mechanical horse thing, you're probably doing it wrong. Western Australia is not intensively farmed, and this comes back to my Israel point. So this again is a very complex. It's like the Battle of the Moon of Endor in Star Wars or something. But the bottom axis, this is export value per square kilometer. How many dollars you export per square kilometer? The other axis is how many dollars you export per person. But the trick to these axes, they're logarithmic. So it's 1, 10, 100,000. So Western Australia is over here. We get a bit of exports per person, about equivalent to Latvia or Uruguay. But in terms of dollars per square kilometer, we get nothing. We get nothing. Pipped by everyone. Ghana, for God's sake. Ethiopia. Everyone pips us on that measure. The government set a goal of doubling agri-food value in real terms. So here's the challenge. I'm going to double. That's not too hard. We think you can do a lot better than that. Maybe let's, really dream the big dream, and maybe go for Ghana. You know, it's going to have to come from exports. I don't need to belabor this point. You know that. The domestic market's not going to suck it up. So in theory, and again, we have these lovely theories. When government talks about things, they can't tell you the truth. I can tell you the truth. In theory, you have this nice thing. It's like, you know, this is political correctness in business. You don't want to say it's always about everything else, the schools and everything else want to do this. The political correct answer is everyone's going to double. You're all going to, everyone, all children are exceptional, all graphs go up. In practice, some sectors are going to need to quadruple or grow 5 or 10 times bigger because other sectors can't hang. I know exactly what those sectors are, and I took the labels off because I didn't want to start an argument. But you know who they are too, right? There's certain sectors aren't going to grow and are probably going to grow backwards. Sheep, I didn't say that. This project is targeted at agri-food sectors with the potential to grow 5 or 10 times bigger. So we're not looking for a little bit of doubling, we're looking for big. Let's just think big here. Go back to think big. Peer groups demonstrate this level of growth is possible. Here's Spain, how much they've grown their pork exports. Frozen potatoes, how much Belgium's grown their potato exports. U.S. poultry meat exports. You can grow exports even in a high-cost economy. It's not all going to China. Market demand isn't the challenge. Asia wants everything. Doesn't even matter what you produce, they'll take it. Thanks, send it out. It has to be at the right price. You've got to be competitive on price. We'll skip a lot of these. The one I want to get to is this one. So this is, again, bottom, this is absolute growth and then rate of growth. For those at the back, you're the little green circle there, produce. You're not performing. You're not delivering the goods to our big growth plan here. We've got the Death Star out here, grains, oil seeds, that's looking pretty good. Processed foods looking great. Produce, not, dairy and eggs going backwards and beverages looking a bit sad. But produce needs to lift its game. Here's some other countries. Here's Spain. Here's Italy. Very different picture. I mean, look at Spain's produce performance. Look even Italy, a much bigger circle and getting growth out of it. So, and obviously a lot more processed foods. So, what are we trying to do with this project? There's some sectors we think are broadly competitive. Wheat, beef, lamb, canola, carrots, rock lobster are competitive. There's some sectors that, still dreamers and whatever, bush foods and choco and camel milk and artichokes, you name it. Good luck with that stuff, capers, kangaroo meat. Then there's the ones that are seeking competitiveness. I assume most of you in the room in the middle category were seeking competitiveness. That's what the project we're trying to do. I'm not going to talk through a lot of the detail. You're welcome to it. We then say, well, why aren't you competitive? Why aren't you competitive? And you get a bunch of excuses. Farmers love excuses. When I say farmers, you're not farmers, are you? You're all property speculators. You're property speculators that dabble in farming just to sort of pass the time till you liquidate your property portfolio. Because farming, you have to make a living off of farming. If you go back since the last 10 years, did you make any money farming? No. You made any money in property. Your property speculation, because you're not farmers. Because if you're farmers, you sell the damn farm because the return's diabolical. More money at McDonald's. A wide range of explanations are given for why you're uncompetitive. Okay, look, marketing, it's lack of skills, the high price of land, electricity costs. You heard any of these before? Yeah, you know all of these ones. Hot water access, environmental regulations, export regulations, red tape, labor costs. I'm going to use these German backpackers. They don't know anything. You're going to need some Mexicans. Lack of Western Australia brand. All of these things, we're ignoring the elephant in the room for these uncompetitive sectors. Here he is. He can come up in a second. These explanations fail to explain why some sectors are competitive while other very similar sectors are not. Carrots exports $48 million worth of product. Potatoes exports $2. Okay, lamb exports $500 million. Pork exports $33. For all intents and purposes, they're almost the same thing, and yet one's competitive and one's not. All rich developed countries are high cost with cumbersome, inefficient regulations. This doesn't cause them to be like, Belgium has all of these issues, wage costs and burdens, and yet they've managed to grow their potato exports. I mean, the UK just left Europe either to stop immigrants or to get away from European regulation. They have all of these problems that you have and more, and they still manage to grow their potato exports. Here he is. This is Lucky. We called him Lucky. We didn't think he would make it to the final document. We thought he would have gotten edited out, but Lucky made it through. Here's the elephant in the room. I'm going to tell you the truth. Insulated, that means protected. Agri-food sectors have inefficient operations and are not competitive. Okay, let's go back to my sports metaphor, right? You got some bush league team. Maybe you play for your local AFL club down in the local township. You're not going to take on Collingwood. You don't even know that, though, because you're only in your own little league. You're playing in your own little league, and we don't let anyone else in the league, and you're protected. You're in a protected industry. Let's talk about everything else. Let's talk about clean and green and brand and everything else. If you're protected, you become inefficient. You don't become more efficient by being protected. You become less efficient by being protected. Western Australian agri-food markets are insulated from competition by a range of factors. You're protected by biosecurity, national biosecurity, religion, investment laws, language, culture, and tradition, state biosecurity, regulations, distance, scale economies, and local market size. All of those things insulate you from being out there and competing every day. And the fact that you don't even know who the best in the world is at what you do. You don't know who the Lionel Messi of whatever you grow is. And when we look at any of the data, the performance gap between where Western Australia is and many products in this room and world best practice is a long way. Signs that an industry is uncompetitive, I won't go through a lot of this. When you go to export, and here's where it comes, when your Bush League team suddenly says we're going to go and play Collingwood, you suddenly get your head handed to you on a plate. You got to cross this competitiveness gap because you're up here in the clouds at your insulated price in your happy little zone, and then you got to go out to the world price and you go, oh, we can go take them on because you believe the hype. You believe all of the marketing hype and everything else. You've been told that you're the greatest farmers in the world and you're amazing and you're everything else, and then you go out to the world and you get your head handed to you on a plate because the world price is way down here, and you got to cross that gap. And there are ways to cross that gap, but it's not by going up further in terms of more price. It's by building your way down there. When we go and look, this isn't some kooky theory I cooked up. When we go and look, we find it every day. Here's avocados. Okay, that is all of the avocados in the world that are exported that cross borders on the bottom axis, and then another axis is price. Okay, so avocados right there, Australia, most expensive avocados in the world, and look, lo and behold, we get a tiny little sliver. If you want to send more avocados to the world, because all these avocado trees coming on, and farming goes through those boom and bust cycles, and I don't want to say what's going to happen, but it's pretty obvious. We need to climb down this. We need to climn down this curve, and I'm not saying we've got to go from US 343 or whatever it is a kg down to 50 cents or down to $1.13. But if we could get to US prices, maybe get to New Zealand prices, US prices, then we go to Spanish prices. But you look down here, Israel. Israel's exporting avocados for $1.58 US. Here's my question. It comes back to my sports metaphor. How are they doing that? How are they doing that? They're in a God-honest biblical desert. All of their neighbors hate them. They get shelled on a regular basis. Do you want to farm where you are or there? Let's go and figure out how they're doing that. Just go and see them. Just get on a plane, go over there and figure out what they're doing. To escape the competitiveness gap, Western Australian agri-food firms need to transition from a negative feedback loop to a positive feedback loop. So when you're in this negative feedback loop, and I think if you think about some of the sectors that you'll realize this, that you have falling production leading to high prices, leading to plant closures. Think of the potato sector in the state. Leading to lower demand and less volume, leading to inefficient, unprofitable operations, leading to falling production. You get in this doom loop that just sort of spins around. We need to get this positive feedback loop. We've got growing production, competitive prices, new investment, more demand, and efficient, profitable operations. And we need to figure out how to cross that. So that's the context of the question we're trying to answer. Then let's talk a little bit about what we see. I'm going to skip some of this stuff here. This was the more academic ends of DAFWA. I wanted to know some of this stuff. In some things, Western Australia works. This is Western Australia's share of global trade in some products. So wheat was 6% of the global trade in wheat. Rolled oats, 6% of the global trade in rolled oats. Carrots, 2% of global trade in carrots. 7% of sheep. This is just Western Australia. This isn't all of Australia. This is just Western Australia. 33% of rock lobster and 6% of canola seeds. So when it works, when we make it work, it works. When we make it, we can win. We can win. We can field a team that can take on the best teams in the world when we're out there and we're competitive. But we need to get some more of our teams on this page and fewer of our teams hiding behind all the barriers that they hide behind. Here's the answer. It's a very fancy model. Some boxes on it. Consultants love this stuff. Government loves models. It says something that's blindingly obvious. I'm sure we could go back to ancient Egypt and one of the pharaoh's advisors on the Nile could have pointed this out. To produce food, you need resources. You need land and water and labor and inputs. You need a world-class production system. You need high yields, large operations, proven scalable systems, and skills and experience. You then need efficient primary wholesaling and processing, efficient and productive at scale, close to production areas. You need efficient value-added processing at scale. And then you need access to markets, your local markets, your regional markets, and your export markets. That's what you need. And if you think about the sectors in Western Australia that are working, they've got this. Grain looks just like this. Grain's got all of the things that we need on this. We could do more in terms of value adding. Scotland exports, with a tiny amount of grain, exports twice as much, in terms of whiskey as we do in terms of grain. So we turn more of our grain into whiskey, we'd be looking good. But other than that, this is what success looks like. Now, the people in this room can't drive all of these. The people in this room can drive the second column, world-class production systems. This is the bit that I'm saying to you. Go out and figure out who's the Manchester United or whatever the hell it is you grow. And for God's sake, get on a plane. Before you spend any more money on a tractor or on something else, get on a plane and go and see them wherever the hell they are. In New Mexico, in Israel, in Spain, and see what they're doing and figure out how they're doing it and copy that. And that's probably the summary of the whole thing, but we'll stick some more padding around it. Industry can drive the middle bit, as I said. I won't talk through a lot of these because it's a lot of detail there about what you can do to drive them. I won't talk about that one. Let's get into the guts of it for the people in the room, which is, what do you need? You need high yields, you need large operations, you need proven scalable systems, and skills and experience. And look at some case studies. So we looked at a number of sectors in Western Australia. Number one, Western Australia needs to dramatically increase yields in non-competitive sectors to get to competitiveness. So this is meat per pig, and here's potatoes per hectare. So obviously Western Australia, the problem child, in orange over there to the right, must stay after class and do their homework. So yield, we need to perform better on yield. But if I just say to you yield, you're going to say something. You're going to say, oh, yeah, but mom likes them more, or there's some other excuse like that. And because our soil isn't as good, we don't have any water, dog ate my homework, whatever it is. The minute you look at it, that's a point in time. The minute you look at it as a dynamic system, you see that it changes. You're not stuck with your yield. Your yield isn't fixed by nature or God or the government. So what I've got here, this is 1961 through 2013. This is pigs per carcass. So we got Chile there. Not Chile, that's the Atacama Desert. That's a proper desert as well. You look at their meat per pig, it's trending upwards, and then it does this lift off there. And then we see Western Australia tracking that, but kind of running 25 years behind. And then if we overlay the two of them, well, Western Australia, we seem to go and do what Chile did. And once we see it as a dynamic system like that, we can suddenly ask the question, well, how did they do that? What happened at this point of transformation here? And how do we go and copy that? And more than that, if we'd gone back in time and I'd said I'm going to point at the chart. Say here. If I stood up in front of you there, at that point on the chart, and said to you, you need to catch up with Chile, you would, it's impossible, we can't do it. But then you've proceeded to do it over the last 20, 30 years. You're caught up with them, but then they've moved ahead in leaps and bounds. So you've got to see it as constantly improving. You've got to keep getting better constantly in terms of yields and all of your other key variables. In many of the sectors we look at, I have to say, once you get outside the globally competitive ones, Western Australia is 25 years behind in farming in a lot of sectors. You're 25 years behind in your systems, your processes, your management, your scale, in a lot of things, okay? And I've been on a lot of farms. All I've ever done in my whole life, one side of my family are farmers. I've been to a lot of farms in my life. I've been to a lot of agribusinesses. Lift your game. Okay, agriculture is rapidly shifting to larger operational units. This is the U.S. This is share of hogs produced by operational unit size. So this is, every sector looks like this. We're moving to larger and larger and larger production units. This is where the economies of scale are, especially if you want to be an export. This is who you're competing with. Okay, now let's drop it back to a sector that you guys are going to be more comfortable with. Outside a handful of sectors, Western Australian agribusiness sectors are subscale relative to global peers. Most Western Australian agri-food operations are hobby scale by global standards. Okay, this is, the blue is every single potato grower in Western Australia. Every single potato grower's approximate size. And that's the average large in Idaho. I'm not saying the largest of the large. That isn't the largest potato farm. That's just average large. That's like hobby, small, medium, large. We're going to take all the potato growers in Idaho, split them into 4 groups. There's one called large. The average large grower in Idaho produces, 1.3 times as many potatoes as the state of Western Australia. So we could convince him to move here and build one farm. We could double the size of potato production in the state. You're playing in the Bush League. You're playing in the Bush League. Okay, Western Australia needs more scale, more large-scale operations to reach global competitiveness. Pigs produced per unit, potatoes per operation. I can show this chart over and over again. You want to name the product. These are the ones we did for the case study. We also did dairy. So then in peer group regions, so Utah, 2 large pig operations in Utah produce almost as many pigs as all 95 pig producers in Western Australia. 1 large Washington I already talked about in potatoes. What we're seeing in farming, all of you know this, all of you have seen this, anyone who's got a family who's been in farming. Farming starts out over here with a large number of small units. It moves towards a small number of large units. When we look at the sectors that are competitive, this is what's happening in grain. This is what's happening this is what carrots looks like right now. Why are carrots competitive? It looks more like this. Large-scale integrated, the integrated grower, packer, shipper model came out of California. In the rest of the world, the minute you're sort of deregulated and uncontrolled and unprotected, you move towards what was originally the California model, which is this integrated grower, packer, shipper. So wonderful citrus, run by a marketing genius. She's absolutely a genius, but produces 33 times more citrus than Western Australia. So they own their own orchards. They've also got contract growers. They feed it through 4 pack houses. 33 times as much citrus. So the minute someone in Western Australia says, I'm going to go out and compete with the world, my Bush League team's going to take on this right here. This is the Lionel Messi. This is the Manchester United or the FCB Barcelona of citrus. You're fighting with them. You're competing with them. You got to climb down that cost curve. Why? Why are we going to larger operations? Large-scale operators achieve higher yields. You don't immediately think this. You don't immediately think to yourself, because your simple model is some tiny little half a hectare thing in the back blocks of Italy somewhere, and Giuseppe, he goes up on the hillside every day and he looks after each tree and knows it by name and lives on EU subsidies. And you think he must get higher yields and better quality because he looks after every individual tree and knows them by name or something. But no, it's the opposite. The bigger farmers get better yields. Maybe that's why they're bigger farmers. Maybe they bought out their less efficient neighbors. Why else are we going to large-scale operations? Large-scale operations have lower costs. So as you get bigger, you can amortize your fixed costs over your variable costs more easily. And then finally, large-scale operations are more profitable. And sector after sector we look at, what you find is when you do proper accounting, when you account for the farmer's time, and when you account for a rent on the land, and when you do proper accounting, you account for all of those costs like it was a business, you suddenly find that only really large operations make money. And so all of these farmers tell you there's no money in farming, I lose money all the time, and they all whinge about it. Well, it's probably because they're too small. And then the analysis that you do when you look at farming is you say, well, take the farmer and how many hours he worked, and he would have made more money working at McDonald's. And then of course we can. I'll go to an agricultural industry thing, and what you'll say is you'll say we can't get the youth to enter farming. Nobody wants to. We need to go and market the industry to the youth. And my kids, I sent them off to university, and they did real well in uni, and they don't want to come back and work on the farm. It's because your kid's smarter than you. He can figure out the time value of his money, and he can go work at McDonald's. Make more money than you are. I'm going to get a property speculation, probably do something somewhere else as well. So if we want to get them in the industry, it's got to be profitable, and they've got to work something other than slave hours and slave labor. So we've got to fix the production system, and then once we fix the production system in the sectors that are not yet globally competitive, then that will enable efficient wholesaling and processing, which will then attract value-added processing. And sometimes we get this polarity right. You see farmers and agricultural organizations getting the polarity right. They think what they need is to get some value-added processors to arrive, and then the value-added processors will then, then make some efficient wholesalers will appear, and then pay them more. And they get the polarity wrong. You got to be world-class, efficient, competitive farms. That then the cascade comes from you. You, the farmer, make everything else happen. Everything else can't make you happen. You're the start of the chain. The chain flows back to you. Western Australia needs larger, more modern plants that are more efficient. So here we're comparing the Seaboard Triumph plant in Sioux City, Iowa, with Craig Mostyn, which gets 97% of the pigs in Western Australia go through this plant. They're just getting a higher productivity out of the plant because they're putting more pigs through it, more volume through the plant, higher productivity. Western Australian plant size and throughput's a function of production. So here we're comparing New Zealand and Western Australia plant size. So we've got total milk production, and then how many processing plants there are, so ergo milk per processing plant. So the average New Zealand milk processing plant does 775 million litres. Western Australia does 121. Lo and behold, we struggle to compete. But it's not the processors. And you talk to the dairy guys, they keep telling you, if the processor would just pay us more money. The processor can't pay you any more money because he's got to compete with someone that's got 5 times the efficiency. Competitive regions attract new plants. You get your competitiveness going, and you can attract new plants. And again, it's a dynamic system. I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm trying to be positive about this. But you need to go and benchmark yourself, and then you need to start climbing down that cost curve. I've got 4 minutes left, right? I'll skip forward a few here. There's 3 strategies, and these are very simplified. These are simplified little models, and you do what you want with these. You can be a rocket. You can make the race for space. You can grow for size and capacity. You can say, right, I'm going to go out there and build a world scale plant. You can stay here in the shark tank and fight amongst yourselves and sort of, slowly, 3 of them, and now there's only 2 left. Or you can retreat into some kind of defensible castle. So on one axis, you've got yield, or any other similar efficiency measure, whatever you want to say your efficiency measure is. And then the other axis, you've got size. You can be efficient and small. You can be large and inefficient. If you're large and inefficient, you blow up. You raise a lot of money, you build some huge farm somewhere, and then you go under because you blew out your balance sheet because you're not a good operator. But the driver is yield. If you get low yields or low efficiency, you're eventually going to go out of business, and you're into the graveyard, and the rest of you are going to sit in the shark tank. And I'll give you a real-world example of this because you still think that I don't quite know what I'm talking about. In New Zealand, there's a guy, Murray McPhail. Some of you might know him. Grows broccoli, among other things, squash, grows. Made a shed load of money selling squash into Japan. There's a window. New Zealand had a narrow window into Japan. Made a shed load of money. I would use another word other than shed, but he made a lot of money selling squash into Japan. Took that money, went to California, and saw the large integrated broccoli producers there who were laser leveling their fields and greenhouses and bringing the product out. And then he saw the huge integrated harvesters they were using, and they were ice packing in the fields. They had guys hung in the harnesses. You sort of pick the broccoli and put it up behind you and feed it. And he had enough money to do it. And so he said, right, I'm going to do this. This is good. I'll do that. So he had enough money. He went and bought all the kit. Brought it back to New Zealand, set it up. He immediately blew everyone else in New Zealand out of the water in the broccoli market and took something like 40% plus of the market himself. There were 2 other broccoli growers who had enough money to copy him. So there were 3 broccoli growers who had, call it 80% of the market plus between them, sort of basically in a very short period of time. But if you go and ask Statistics New Zealand how many broccoli growers there are in New Zealand, they'll tell you there's 100. There's 100 broccoli growers. So capitalism is not a democracy. You can't have a vote. So if we do a poll of broccoli growers in New Zealand, 97% of the broccoli growers will say, it's dire, we can't make any money, we're sharks here in the tank, it's all, we lose money most of the time. But there's 3 of them who are 60% of the industry who are making very good money. Murray's got a huge house, he wears a white cowboy hat, got a Confederate flag over it, I don't know why. But Murray McPhail, go and see him if you want to see what to do. So he's a rocket. Everyone else in the broccoli industry in New Zealand is in the shark tank. Some people can retreat to the castles, and there's some strategies around what that is and what you do about that. But that's the takeaway for the people in the room. I've got 1 minute left, so I'm going to wind it up there. I could go on for quite a while here. But I think the key takeaways I want to give you are take some of that energy that you put into your sports, into your thinking about the AFL or cricket or whatever it is you care about, and if you spent 5% of the time you spent looking at the sports section, trying to think about who's the best at the world at growing what you grow, and then next time you go on holiday, go to wherever the hell that is and go and look at their farm or go and figure out what they're doing. That would be my main takeaway to you. Then second, think strategically about your business and where you want to go with it. Now, I'm going to wrap it up there, but I know I presented a lot of material. There's been a lot of dense stuff there. Happy to discuss it with any of you, and that is at no charge. If you feel guilty about it, you can feel free to buy me lunch, or in fact, we'll see how the band goes. It'll be a nice lunch if 100 of you call. But happy to discuss it with any of you. Please just give me a call. We're based in Perth. Happy to help. So that's where we are, and thank you, and good luck to all of you.